What we're really just trying to do here is both honor the voters with Prop D and just make it simpler and less confusing for our voters. So we're really trying to have one election system every time. So this is an amendment to charter to the section 5 of Article 4 that removes the special election language. So really what would be alignment with Prop D, which was passed in 2020. So just a refresher that 68% of city voters voted to have approval voting, which was also nonpartisan voting here in the city. So all of us alder people and the citywide seats are all done on approval voting on a nonpartisan basis. So what this bill does, it aligns it with the charter, not by adding language, but it simplifies it by striking the elections language, which reduces confusion. I mean, one thing that we have been working on consistently in the city is trying to get increased voter turnout, try to increase voter engagement, and certainly switching to a new system and then having two different systems ends up being pretty confusing because we've just told voters that we're moving to a totally new thing, except in special instances. And in a minute, you'll hear from Ben Borgmeyer of the Board of Elections, but this has caused issues with every special election we've had, and that's been consistent. I believe the city has spent more than $30,000 just in lawsuit cost alone, and extra cost just trying to figure this out. It also is difficult for them to literally create two different types of ballots. And since we've made this change in 2020, we've run into bumps every special election. So this would simplify future election changes because it removes the conflicting language. Next slide, please. What it does not do, it doesn't change, it doesn't add any election rules, it doesn't change the system. So if the voters vote a different way and we decide to move away from approval voting or change how we vote, it would not affect that because it literally is just taking this language out of the charter to better align with what we're already doing now.
So essentially, for approximately 5 years, the city charter and selection code have pointed in different directions on how vacancy elections should be conducted. One contemplates a partisan certification process, the other establishes a nonpartisan framework. That inconsistency has repeatedly created administrative uncertainty for the election board, particularly around candidate intake. Did I do a bad job? Okay. Ballot design and compliance with state ballot printing statutes. The election board's role is ministerial. We do not have authority to choose between conflicting legal directives or to design hybrid election systems. When governing documents conflict, the board is placed in a position of administering elections defensively rather than cleanly. From an administrative standpoint, repealing the charter provision governing vacancy elections would resolve a longstanding structural conflict and allow the board to administer those elections under a single, coherent framework. Clear alignment between the charter and the election code improves predictability for candidates, voters, political organizations, and the election authority alike. Our concern is not about who participates in elections, but about administrating elections under rules that are clear, lawful, and consistently applied. Regardless of the outcome of this proposal, the election board will faithfully administer the law as adopted. From our perspective, aligning the charter with the election code would reduce ambiguity, lower the risk of error or litigation, and allow us to focus more on our core responsibility, which is running accurate, fair, and impartial elections for the voters of the city.
Where we are right now as a city with our zoning code is that we do not have any specific regulations for data centers. They're treated as warehousing, which means they're a conditional use in many zoning districts and are actually permitted by right in other districts, such as downtown and in industrial districts. Next slide, please. We're operating under this sort of interim framework right now, established by Executive Order 92 and Resolution 111, which 5 months ago put in place, kind of recognizing that we are not well positioned as a city with kind of our no regulations in our zoning code. So this executive order kind of set that data centers would be a conditional use in districts F through L. There's a very detailed question set applied to any applicant. And this executive order directed us as staff to bring forward regulations within 5 months. So that's what brings us here tonight. And what the executive order and resolution asks us to look at are acceptable zoning districts for the use, minimum separation requirements, building compatibility, noise limitations, screening, and public outreach and engagement in the regulations. So that is what we've attempted to do. So tonight, based on research, we've prepared a very preliminary set of recommended regulations. Ultimately, for these to be enacted, the Planning Commission would need to recommend regulations, and then they'd be enacted through the legislative process at the Board of Aldermen. So just to give you a sense of what our research included, many interviews with subject matter experts and a variety of stakeholders. We participated in webinars and roundtables, reviewed what we could find on the topic. We visited some existing data centers in the region. We reviewed a lot of cities' zoning regulations to see how other cities were handling this. We spoke to those other cities and spoke also with other departments within the city to try to coordinate. And yes, we are recommending that we be given some time to refine these and keep public hearing open. As I mentioned before, we have really no regulations. We do, under the executive order and resolution 111, have conditional use districts, but not a structured process outside of that. What we're proposing to do kind of at the highest level is borrow from the best of what other cities are doing and try to integrate that into our city in a way that makes sense for St. Louis.
The general understanding, data centers use an enormous amount of energy for both their servers and their cooling needs. So a lot of that energy, a good portion of it goes to just cooling the servers themselves, but also the servers as they run. The energy intensity is incredibly high compared to other building uses, and it's really rapidly changing. We have seen some opportunities from other cities where they've had creative projects to use waste heat from data centers to meet other needs. And another trend that we see is that servers and data centers have become more and more powerful over time in a very short amount of time. So their energy density is increasing. Alongside with this, the water usage is very high, but it actually really depends on the cooling system. So there are trade-offs between having a more air-cooled system or a water-cooled system or something in between, a hybrid using different types of technology. Intense water usage can be a huge issue when using groundwater in an agricultural rural area. And it's our understanding that the city's water division actually has more than enough capacity to serve a data center or other, large water users like hospitals or hotels. So within the zoning approach to this, to address energy and water use, we're asking or suggesting that we have data centers require a disclosure of their energy needs and expected energy and water efficiency. They're encouraged to have early engagement with the water division around site-specific water issues, set many and specific building energy efficiency standards such as LEED certification, and encourage and require connection to the district energy system, as well as a handful of renewable energy requirements. However, back on the other side of the coin, we have seen some scenarios in the news of data centers coming online before they're able to connect to the grid. So they're using diesel generators as their primary source of power, and that is not what we want to happen in St. Louis. So within the zoning approach, we're asking to require the full picture up front. So what does that new transmission infrastructure look like? What substation upgrades or developments need to happen? We want to understand the status and agreement of work with the electric service providers. We're going to require a willing to serve letter from the utility prior to providing a certificate of occupancy and encourage connection to district energy. But beyond zoning, there are some tools that could be used, such as development agreements or developing programs that help reduce energy burden.
Regulations. So we are requiring some space for an active use on the ground floor outside of industrial districts. And we're limiting more industrial scale data centers to industrial districts. Those really cannot be very successfully integrated into mixed use parts of our city. Another important theme is the impact of data centers on the surrounding area. They can emit significant noise. The backup generators can create significant emissions and do require regular testing to make sure that they are, in fact, in good working order, and also to maintain compliance with federal regulations that are administered by state Department of Natural Resources. And it's true, accessory equipment, if it's not properly screened, can create some visual clutter. New substations may be required. Those also have to be part of the picture of a development. But cities very commonly establish noise, screening, and buffering requirements. There are fairly good tools for screening, and we're, I think, actively learning more and hope to refine some of the emission standards for generators. But there are tools beyond zoning that merit consideration, again, like development or community benefits agreements. Some communities are starting to explore restrictions on the use of NDAs. An important theme, this is really the upside, right, about the fiscal and economic impacts of data centers. Fiscal benefits can be very significant. Data centers entail very extensive capital investment through both construction, but also ongoing recurring equipment upgrades and sort of continued purchases. So real estate and especially personal property tax revenues are very high, and revenue to a city and to our school district and other taxing jurisdictions, that has real meaning, real value to schools, to our ability to provide quality city services. These also require and entail many, many construction jobs and very kind of high skill, complex trades participating in these developments. And because these require frequent upgrades to systems, some of these jobs are kind of replenishing is a term that some people use, that because it's not just a one-time thing, they require a lot of upgrades. There are fewer permanent jobs. However, the permanent jobs are fairly high skill and high paid. And data centers can strengthen other local industries. Compute-intensive functions are increasingly integrated into healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and other industries. There is a role and importance of like proximity with data and compute power, because that mitigates latency or the potential delay in accessing data. And there's the potential to support existing local businesses. Some of our existing data centers are simply storing data for local businesses, right? That data does need to be stored in some secure location, or even anchor new businesses that are looking for great compute power very close to their new location. Now, it's also true that the increasing integration of AI into our economy is expected to displace jobs kind of no matter where data centers are built. That is a significant challenge and concern.
Is there a way to kind of track the impact or I know it's difficult to project and model what the likely impact would be given the lack of transparency with a lot of these developments, and I get all of that. But is there a way to kind of tie the relative impact to these proposed developments with the incremental gains of the sustainability goals and performance over time? Is that something that you're thinking about?
That's something that we're looking into, because really the energy usage is something that we can't really control, right? The building envelope design can be as great as possible. The data center can be as efficient as it is, but it's still using an exponential amount of energy. So either we need to figure out how to encourage more renewable energy or lower the energy demand overall, either through, different options like suggested the peak performance type system, or even for residents, like how can we incorporate more renewable energy or reduce our energy burden to kind of like reduce the negative impacts.
Right. Thanks.
Well, just quickly to add on that, and this would be outside of zoning, but tied into zoning, is the idea of adding data centers into the city's energy and water monitoring, or what's called benchmarking, though there's not so much to benchmark or compare. They're also different. But the intent of that would be to track the water, the energy, and I believe the sources for energy, the energy mix. Because even if a data center falls into a given type, even if they have a maximum power demand set agreement set with Ameren, they may for years not kind of expand their capacity up to that limit. So knowing the actual energy and water use, I think will help. It'll also help us refine the requirements. And if we move forward with renewable energy standards, that's really necessary for tracking compliance.
No, that's great. It actually led me to my second question. Given kind of the gold rush nature of this industry at the moment, and just the intensity of investments and the intense pace of innovation, is there a thought that, periodically or maybe episodically, depending on changes in technology or whatever, to kind of would trigger a review or an adjustment of this? I like the fact that it's in one chapter because it makes all that easier to do, right?
Yeah, I think we've recognized that this is something we'll have to keep up with. We haven't talked about a set interval or kind of time period at which we do a review. But I think that's worth thinking about, kind of an automatic trigger for a review or update.
Right.
And also, I think I kind of skimmed over this, but especially for the public's knowledge, we are parallel to all of this, kind of also comprehensively updating our city's zoning code. All of this ultimately would have to be integrated into that, which creates right there sort of immediate opportunity for refinement. And I think the new code hopefully will give us more and better tools to strengthen even what we're trying to achieve here.
Thank you. So led by our planning staff, many city departments have been collaborating to formulate thoughtful regulations around data centers. The takeaway from Wednesday evening's Planning Commission meeting is that most people want sensible regulations on this rapidly growing and changing industry. I want to give our planning staff room to work on these regulations and give the public confidence that we are doing this in a thoughtful and practical way that isn't rushed. I want to make sure that we have new data centers that comply with these regulations and protect our residents and give developers a clear idea of what can be done in our city. If you have an application that's already in the process, this won't affect that. A pause is just an acknowledgement that we will resume processing new applications when rules are put in place that everyone can follow. Our residents deserve to know that we are listening and that we're making sure that there are practical regulations in place to protect them.